All right, in the interest of time, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Minnesota HIMSS webinar series. I'm Vitaly Hirasevich, Professor of Anesthesiology and Medicine at Mayo Clinic, and your host today. It's my pleasure to introduce our today's speaker, Dr. Piyush Mathur. He is a staff anesthesiologist and critical care physician at Cleveland Clinic. He has more than 20 years of the clinical experience and complete residency in anesthesiology and fellowship in both critical care and quality at Cleveland Clinic. He is a past program director of anesthesiology critical care fellowship at Cleveland Clinic. He is a person who is trained in computer programming, machine learning, and deep learning on the top of his medical degree. And he is a founder of the BrainX AI healthcare application research and development company. He very engaged in communities, critical care community, society critical care medicine, where he part of the committees and also chair of the postgraduate educational committee. Today, he is going to talk how COVID pandemic facilitate and change artificial intelligence, machine learning, and pertinent stuff. Thank you for your willing to participate, Piyush, in this activity, and looking forward to your talk.
Thank you, Vitaly. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
All right, thank you, Vitaly, and Minnesota HIMSS chapter. Thank you for hosting me and giving me this opportunity to share my experience and some of the knowledge over here. So a couple of disclaimers. I'm the co-founder for BrainX and BrainX Community. Both are AI and healthcare companies. And today, the learning goals and objectives are to understand what's the landscape of research and development related to AI and healthcare. What are some of the challenges and pitfalls related to implementation of AI in healthcare, and look at the future and see what are the future possibilities for the use of AI in healthcare. And the way I've designed this talk is to talk about it in relationship with COVID and the impact of COVID-related work and COVID-unrelated work during the COVID pandemic. So over the last year or two, there is a lot of work that has gone into AI research and development related to COVID itself. But beyond that, there is a large corpus of work that has been done unrelated to COVID-19 itself. And I'm going to try to showcase both during this talk. So one of the first few questions, why AI in healthcare, and takes me back to a paper that was shared by my chairman, which was on complex adaptive systems. And at that point of time, I didn't understand it well, but it's an engineering concept. Let's talk about how complex some of these systems are, and how the agent there, the exchange of information, the different nodes of intersections, the probabilities, the data exchange, and the adaptation takes place. I don't think this is different from healthcare. This engineering concept is too different from healthcare when we think about how hospitals or healthcare systems function. And that was the impetus for me to start exploring these engineering concepts more. I had no background in engineering at that point of time. And that is what led me to looking at AI and learning more about it. Now, I do understand that there are a lot of skeptics who say, well, we don't believe in AI. We don't think we need AI. So we will do a quick model development over here to show its validation. So let's look at this. So looking at this picture, it's a picture classification model. If you think about this gentleman over here in the picture and ask you the question, would you classify it male or female? Probably all of us would agree and classify it male with a great degree of certainty. Now, looking at this picture, it gets a little bit more complex. There is probably some proportion that would say like it's either not sure, or they might say, well, it could be male. But yes, to a large degree of certainty, you might say that this is female. How about this? Would you classify it as male or female? Now, here's the study that was published in 2018 where they developed this machine learning prediction models looking at retinal fundus exams or their photos. And with a high degree of accuracy, they were able to predict whether the fundus belonged to male or female. Now, we can argue what's the utility of that, but it wasn't just predicting male or female gender. They were able to predict a lot of other healthcare instances, like the smoking status, the systolic blood pressure, and cardiac event with a high degree of accuracy. The point being that artificial intelligence has this ability to look at the data and look at the patterns and be able to predict or characterize the pattern of what it is seeing in ways different from we humans classically do. And that's where the value of AI comes in. And when you think about AI, again, it's a vast field. It's similar to healthcare, where there are a lot of different specialties within healthcare. Similarly, artificial intelligence has a lot of different subgroups. So it's not just a homogeneous entity. It's a large science. Within that, there are machine learning, there is deep learning, neural networks. Again, I'm not going to go into the details of that. I'm rather going to show you some examples of that during this talk. Now, another way that it's been classically described is whether it is supervised learning or unsupervised learning. And the case on the left side, in the yellow shaded area of the supervised learning model, is to show the labels, the animal, both to the model and train it first to develop this prediction model, so that when you show that particular model an animal again, it's able to predict it correctly. Whereas on the right side of the screen, in the unsupervised learning method, the model learns by the features and characteristics of the animal and is able to classify it with a great degree of certainty. If it's got a beak, if it's got legs, then it's probably closer to a duck. Whereas if it's got 4 legs and it's got 2 long ears, then it's probably a rabbit. So a few different ways to look at AI itself. I would also caution us when we think about AI, and I think that's one of the expectations mismatch that we have. It is not something that is on the right side of the screen, that you just take a bunch of data, throw it into some kind of a model, and you just randomly pick a model that gives you the most accurate result, and you have the great magic happening over. That's truly not how it works. Rather, on the left side of the screen, I would argue it's got a great, deep mathematical background. It's a lot of statistics trying to predict with high degree of accuracy whatever results you want. So it's a deep mathematical science rather than just thinking of it as some kind of an art or something that just happens. And that's why the research in this area has been expanding. This is something that is close to Vitaly and myself, our critical care area research. And if you look at the artificial intelligence in critical care based research, it's been exploding over the last many years because there is a great opportunity in the data-rich environment that we have to do so. And it's not just research, it's also the number of FDA-approved algorithms that are coming to our bedside. They have also been exploding over the last few years, and not just for one particular specialty. You can see there for multiple specialties. They're getting approved, they're getting adopted, and they are coming to your bedside. Now, all this sounds great, except for when COVID-19 hit us, and it truly felt like a really hard punch. And I don't think this is over. I don't know how many bouts we have gone through now in different places, and it still continues to give us a hard time, and we haven't been able to overcome it. But I'll take you back to the early days of February, March of 2020. And this is from one of my Jupyter notebooks. We were trying to look at some of the data, and we were looking at countrywide and countywide data for COVID-19. And it turned out that we were missing a lot of values. It was just hard. Initially, the data was not good enough. And we ended up creating our own data set to understand what are some of the social and geopolitical characteristics of the spread and mortality of COVID-19 in US. So this was way back when we were early into the COVID-19 pandemic. we curated our own data set from publicly available data sources, and we did put it out there so that everybody can benefit from that. And from there, we created our own model, and we put it in preprint so that other people could look at it, benefit from the work that we have done, and maybe add to that work. And we are glad that many people have made it even better since then. So that was early on into the COVID pandemic. What was also impressive early on was the use of text data. There were some groups who used the text data from the tweets or from social media texts that were floating around, and then looked at how early the text data trends could predict the upcoming pandemic. It was pretty impressive if you look at it being able to predict. So these are like the texts that are going on, the messages that are going on between different people in different countries. And these came few days before the actual peak of the pandemic. So it did give us a sense of what was coming. And what came were more of these curated data sets so that people could look at this, develop better prediction models, and could help in planning for the spread of COVID-19. And not just that, if you remember early in the days, and I think still in some areas, we have been struggling with the diagnosis, with the testing itself of COVID-19. So the tests weren't available, chest x-rays were more readily available, and there was a lot of work that went into looking at chest x-rays or CT scans and using them to predict COVID-19 disease based on the characteristic patterns that we could see with this disease impacting the lungs. So a lot of work since then has gone and focused in this area for COVID-19 disease diagnosis and prediction. Another thing that COVID-19 spurred was different ways of patient monitoring. So if you think about where we were in terms of telehealth, where we were in terms of how people were using AV, even if you think about Zoom and the Zoom meetings, which kind of are exhausting these days. But COVID-19 did put that need into focus, and there was a lot of innovative work done to use telehealth and even distance monitoring of patients that has evolved during this time period. And of course, the vaccines and the drug discovery, a lot of activity has been spurred using AI to do either curate vaccines, to develop vaccines, or to look at various drug molecules and look for how well they can be used to fight COVID-19. So a lot of work on the drug discovery side has been spurred with that. And then, of course, knowledge. There are all sorts of models that have come about which can look at the citations, we can look at the knowledge, because one of the things that happened early on in COVID pandemic was we realized that there was an explosion of knowledge. There was an explosion of knowledge in preprint, and there was an explosion of knowledge in published medium. And then people were also looking at prior knowledge. So how do you curate everything? And that's where there were very interesting NLP tools that were built so that this information that is there within the publications could be curated and could be made readily available. Now, for our group, BrainX community, we do year in review publications. And this is the 2020 year in review. And this is for the first time where we had to create a separate specialty equivalent for COVID-19 because there were so many research articles that had come about in that particular year that we had to create a specialty similar to many other healthcare specialties. And you can see, although it was for the first time in 2020, all these publications were coming out, they actually were way bigger in category, in numbers, than many other specialties. So a lot of publication work has gone in to COVID-19 related publications. But what you can also see in this review is that despite the COVID-19 pandemic, every single specialty made significant gains in non-COVID related AI in healthcare publications. So whether it's radiology, whether it is neurology, nephrology, pick your specialty, and you can see that despite the COVID-19 pandemic, there was significant amount of publications using the methodology that we describe in this review, and substantial progress was made. And that continues. So this is a very nice application, AI for Health .app, where they constantly curate AI-related AI in healthcare publications. It's a live model, so you can go and look at it, and it gives you the latest publications that are coming about. And then you can look at the curve on the right side as it goes up. It is pretty steep. So a lot of publications continue to come. Now, this is both COVID-19 and non-COVID-19, but all AI in healthcare publications. So it's pretty significant rise in the number of publications and research work, which represents research work related to AI in healthcare. And this is all despite our challenge of COVID pandemic. Rather, I would argue that the COVID-19 pandemic has put a lot of impetus upon us and has provided a lot of value in doing this collaborative research, and also making some of the data sets available to us across the world. But again, there have been challenges. There is no doubt that there have been substantial challenges. And despite us trying a lot, credible, good quality research or good quality tools specifically to fight COVID-19 have really not met their expectations. So large firms, even like Google or Facebook, many of those tried early on. A lot of partnerships were made, but we all struggled with this. And I think there are many reasons for that that I'll illustrate later on why this might have happened and what we can do to have better quality of research and better quality of product development for us in the future. But yes, we have to acknowledge the failures in this too. And here is another very nice publication which talks about some of the limitations, constraints, and pitfalls for AI, specifically related to developing COVID-19 solutions and the fight against COVID-19. And yes, we have to recognize its limitations thereby. But these limitations are not just for COVID-19. This wonderful publication, which came out a few months ago, shows that some of the best and the widely implemented, or I should just say widely implemented sepsis prediction models have also not seen good amount of validation. Even some of the best models that are outside of COVID-19 prediction have had their challenges in implementation. So it's one thing to try to develop a model in a retrospective, on a retrospective data set and try to get a high accuracy prediction with that. But when you get into real life, I think the challenges might be very, very different. So these challenges are not just related to COVID-19, but are much larger than just COVID-19. And I think COVID-19 probably just brought some of these out and challenged us to overcome these problems and design better solutions. So now to give you an idea of what's been happening outside of COVID-19, specifically, this is a publication that came out from Cleveland Clinic, where we developed some prediction model, or we developed a prediction model for understanding which patient has a high likelihood of readmission and what are their outcomes going to be. And can we make these personalized for an individual patient as opposed to the population itself? And a lot of work has gone around in predicting readmissions. Here is another wonderful work that came from our institution. And this happened while we were going through the COVID-19 pandemic. This paper that was published previously or prior to COVID-19 pandemic showed that for tools and technologies like echocardiograms, you could leverage artificial intelligence to read them, to extract data similar, if not better, to cardiologist or ultrasonographer level of skills. And during COVID-19 pandemic, here is a wonderful research which showed that when you apply these AI-based algorithms to interpret echocardiograms, and you provide them to nursing, they can provide you with similar level of interpretation compared to many of the ultrasonographers. Now imagine that. It diversifies and democratizes the skill set that is needed to interpret it. We are all facing pretty significant healthcare and skilled worker shortages. So if AI can help in democratizing these skill sets so that there are more people who can use the same tools to acquire the information that we need at bedside, I think it expands patient access and it expands our capabilities. And here is a wonderful example of that happening while during COVID pandemic, this research being done during COVID pandemic. And not just from the point of view of diagnosis, but also from the point of view of procedures. So there are a lot of procedures where AI-based guidance is being provided so that you have better results of your procedure and less trauma or less side effects from those procedures. And what's coming is a combined application of AI with robotics. We all have challenges in different areas. Here is an interesting example of venous access. We sometimes struggle with the patients where we can't get a lab draw and they have to have multiple sticks or to start an intravenous catheter. Now combining AI with robotics, some early work which shows that we can have better success with that. And this is all coming to our bedside soon. So what have we been doing amongst our team is also looking at some of the data challenges. So as I illustrated earlier, in COVID-19 pandemic, one of the issue was missing data. The other issue is how do you curate the data? A lot of people will tell you that in AI problems, 80% of the time and effort is spent by people trying to solve the data pre-processing issues. And this is our work in trying to figure out a solution or a semi-automated pipeline so that we can overcome the data labeling issue and able to curate the data in a semi-automated manner. So currently, it requires a whole number of clinicians to label the data, just like I showed you in a supervised learning model, where you provide the labeled data to that model and the model learns from those labels. In this particular example, we labeled only a small percentage of the data. And from that, the model itself learned and expanded it to rest of the data with a high degree of accuracy. So we're trying to solve our own data prompts and our own data challenges. During the same COVID-19 pandemic, here is the research work from one of my colleagues over here, which represents work validating AI algorithms in healthcare. This is Hypotension Prediction Index, which helps in prediction of hypotension intraoperatively up to 15 minutes ahead of time. And in this particular article and research work, our colleagues over here at the Cleveland Clinic applied this, implemented this in the operating room setting to see how well it works and how well it is adopted. And interesting lessons that they learned from this, that it did not necessarily reduce the intraoperative hypertension, but they also learned that there were challenges in its implementation and acceptability itself. So I think it highlights where the gaps might be. Even if you think about the vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine, something that is so powerful, which is a great amount of efficacy, one of the big challenges that we have found is in its implementation, not necessarily the design. And it's similar in this this AI application too, where it might give you a high degree of or high accuracy of prediction, but the implementation and the adoption is still a big challenge, and that's what we need to learn from. Here is another work that we have been indulging in during the COVID-19 pandemic. We were trying to understand how our patients are, or what kind of patient experiences are occurring in our ambulatory surgery patients, and how can we curate this in a more efficient manner. So we developed this NLP pipeline, which inputs or takes in the Press Guinea comments data. It parses it into positive comments and negative comments. And through that, it creates different categories or themes of topics which are related to the negative comments. And then we have a cohort of actionable themes that we can go after. Now, the beauty of this is you can analyze 15,000 or more comments in less than a minute. But try to do that physically yourself, going through all these comments and trying to classify. We did that. We did that with our residents. It took 4 of our residents a couple of months to do the same analysis. But here, once you've developed this pipeline, it can do this within a month. What's also interesting with this work is that then once you develop this and you validated this, then you can trend these numbers too. So you get the data for a quarter, you can put in your performance improvement measures, and then you can trend them for the next quarter and see if anything changed, anything improved, or whatever improvement measures you put in did work or did not work. So we're trying to make a lot of our administrative work, trying to make our quality improvement more impactful and more in real time. So we have been indulging in this work. We have been working despite the COVID-19 pandemic in trying to develop some of these solutions. Also, some of the strategic guidance around how AI should be adopted. So there was a very nice paper by Leo Selly et al. From Beth Israel and MIT, and they talked about who is going to form the first clinical artificial intelligence department. And here is our response to that, highlighting some of the key metrics that I think need to be defined first before we just go and start a clinical department. And we talked about some of the key metrics for productivity, finance, quality, scholarly activity, education, and more that need to be defined. And I think the group or the groups that define those first and develop the structure or the architecture for a successful department is going to be the most successful department of the future. And just a few months ago, Mount Sinai in New York just declared that they have formed the first division for clinical AI. So a lot of groups are listening to this and are working on developing these departments of the future. Another important work that has gone on during this period is to look at how do we evaluate these AI algorithms. So I showcased a lot of algorithms are being developed over the last many years. This paper working with Dr. Reddy et al. Shows some of the evaluation methods that are important for us to adopt so that once these AI algorithms are getting applied in healthcare settings, we know what the expectations are, we are able to measure them, we are able to see how their performance is, and not just at one point of time or at the point of implementation, but also as these are implemented and they require maintenance. There are a lot of challenges with these algorithms running continuously. There are challenges with the data itself. There are challenges with the systems that run these algorithms. So how do you evaluate all this when you implement AI into healthcare settings is an important question that we try to address through this and propose an evaluation framework to help healthcare systems implement this and understand this better. Again, as I said, a lot of challenges are there. So in front of us, we think about what AI requires is big data. But truly, we don't necessarily have big data at the level of what Google or Facebook or many of these other organizations have. Yes, we think about healthcare data as a big data overall, but it's segregated across different hospitals or healthcare systems. It's within the hospitals and healthcare systems, I'm sure you have encountered that these data sets remain in different silos. They are property of different research groups or different departments. So yes, overall, we might have big data, but truly in the sense of big data, we have a lot of small data sets, and that still continues to be a big struggle, and liberation and availability of the data is an important aspect that was highlighted during this COVID-19 pandemic, just like I showcased earlier. And on the right side of the screen, this photograph again shows you, this is a critical care data set. When you look at the missing values, there are too many missing values for someone to be able to work with in a meaningful way. That's an important, another important aspect that we need to overcome. The quality of data. How good is that data? Many people are imputing data, but if you have lower levels of data, those imputation techniques are not going to work very well. Many people argue that these are because of challenges related to HIPAA or regulatory concerns, GDPR, and many other regulatory issues in Europe or other places. To some extent, yes, but at the same time, these regulations have also facilitated availability of data in a manner where it's more secure. So I don't think we should necessarily look at these as hurdles, but we should look at how do we overcome this while safeguarding the privacy of the data and being respectful of our patients. Another challenge that was unlocked during COVID-19 pandemic that we have known is the lack of knowledge, lack of domain knowledge from healthcare point of view amongst the machine learning or the data scientists, and the lack of knowledge about machine learning or AI amongst clinicians, and thereby having either an expectation mismatch or not a common ground to work together. And some of that is just understanding the basics of the language that is commonly used. That is to understand the basic context of the data that is being handled. And I think that's where what we have found is a lack of unified approach. Bias, ethical, and legal concerns, a lot of these have come about over the last couple of years, and a lot of focus has gone into addressing these, specifically from the data sets themselves. If you think about most of the data, where is it coming from? Is it coming from Caucasian populations? Is it coming from VA, which might have a lot of gender-specific population or otherwise? I think we are realizing some of the challenges and the pitfalls of the data itself and the curation of that way before the modeling or the AI part comes in. So it's unraveling a lot of issues that we really need to work on before we get into the AI model development or implementation itself. And again, I reiterate that this expectation that AI is somehow a magic pill or a magic solution for everything, I think needs to be tempered. It is not magic, it is a science, and science requires a scientific approach for that. We propose some of the solutions for that, and how physician leadership and clinician leadership is extremely important in spearheading this work for AI implementation in healthcare. We do need rigorous model development and testing. We need external validation, multi-site validation. We do that currently with drugs and devices. The same approach needs to be there. We need better assessment tools. We need better frameworks which we can use for assessment of these. We need better explanation and interpretation of the solutions that are being adopted. And of course, these should be generalizable or scalable so that they are not a location-specific or population-specific solutions which don't work well when we expand them to other places. And of course, they have to be cost-effective so that they are accessible to the larger populations and they are not just deployable in certain populations which can afford them. And this particular paper on Concert AI and Spirit AI formulates the basis for some of the guidelines that are there for publication and is an important aspect which is helping a lot of researchers in having the framework so that they can work on that framework as they approach good quality research work and publications. I would also argue that this idea or this approach that I can do it by myself, I just need a laptop and give me the data and I'll create the model all by myself. The Rambo approach is what I call it. It doesn't really work in real life. In real life is what you see on the right side, the heroic effort that was put in evacuating US citizens from Afghanistan. Great heroic effort amongst a lot of different groups. And I think that kind of platform, that kind of collaboration is something that is needed. It's not just for the data scientists to develop a model. It's not just for the clinicians to come up with the solutions. We have to work together. We have to collaborate. And that's where in all different phases of development, whether it's data curation, whether it is data development or model development, or during clinical integration or implementation, we all need to work together because there are big challenges for us that we need to overcome. Well, what can you do? What can you do to help? Well, the first thing I would argue is learn more about artificial intelligence, learn the basic language. What does it mean? It's a pure science. So I think understanding the basic terms is important. Just like I showed you that there is an explosion of research. So any particular journal that you pick up, I'll guarantee you will find some publications related to machine learning or AI topics, and it's good to have the basic understanding. Some of the books that I've shared on the right side of the screen, one of them by Vitaly himself, are great in helping understand how the data is curated, what machine learning models are, and if you want to really dig deeper, the Mathematics for Machine Learning model or machine learning is a great book which describes the mathematical concepts. Again, I get no money for promoting these. These are some of my favorite. That's why I'm showcasing them over here. And not just understanding this language well, but also collaborating with either the machine learning departments. Many of us are universities, work at universities, where the computer science department or the machine learning department are next door, or with certain machine learning companies. Again, some of the health systems have done that very well, collaborating with some of the AI companies or technology companies. Those are great examples of how we will be able to solve some of the problems, some of the challenges that we have found during this COVID-19 pandemic, and how we can evolve better. Doing hands-on projects is extremely important if you want to delve deeper into this. Till the time you don't do that, you don't understand the nuances of some of these projects in a better way. You don't understand the pitfalls or the challenges of AI implementation in healthcare in a better way. So doing some hands-on project, getting involved, even though you may not have to necessarily code, you may not have to develop the model, but getting involved is a great way to get started. And then, of course, for a lot of clinicians or the physicians who are here in this group, leading by sharing the domain knowledge, making it easier for the data scientists or the machine learning engineers is a great help to them. We work with a lot of different collaborators across the world. And one thing we have found is it's a much more efficient model if we are working together. Thereby, they are not struggling in trying to understand what's wrong with the data, and we are not struggling in trying to understand what they are developing. So teamwork is extremely important for AI in healthcare to be successful. Again, a word of caution, beware of the hype cycle. This is the Gartner hype cycle. And if you look at AI for many, many years, it's been right on the top of this hype cycle. So we are still somewhere around peak of inflated expectations. And that is, I think, something that we saw during COVID-19. These expectations were so high from AI without having solved some of the ground level problems of data access, data curation, and implementation. It was not going to be as successful as we thought, although there have been a lot of examples of success which we can learn from. So where are we today? I equated to the lunar mission, where we clearly understood the concept going to the moon. There was a lot of R&D done, a validation of the same, many trials, many of those lunar modules that went up. They figured out the implementation aspects of that. They figured out we can do it time and again, that is the maintenance. And then eventually we were able to go to the moon. So that whole concept we understand well. And I think similarly, when we think about AI and healthcare, we do understand the basic concepts very, very well now amongst various different groups. And data is the new oil is a common phrase that has been thrown around. And Andrew Yang, one of the lead researchers for AI from Stanford, says AI is the new electricity. So there is a lot of impetus, there is a lot of resources, there is a lot of energy behind all this. So these concepts are clear, the resources are getting defined. So the lunar mission or the early part of that has been accomplished in many ways. But as we learned during this COVID-19 pandemic, I mean, we're still trying to define the problems. And I would give credit to some of the healthcare institutions which have recognized these different sets of challenges and are developing solutions towards that, whether it's related to data labeling, pre-processing, the model development itself, the accuracy assessment of those, the implementation and maintenance phase. So a systematic approach, a vision for the future, which many healthcare institutions or in combination with or collaboration with IT companies, many are trying to overcome, is giving us a better direction for the future. In the future, I think beyond AI being the new electricity, what we need to see is building of some of these utility companies, which I call, we need to build the utility companies which will distribute this electricity and thereby build the future for us. That's what needs to happen. And the future state going beyond the lunar mission is going to be a little bit more like the mission Mars. And I don't think we'll be using the same concepts that we use for lunar missions or some of the concepts that we have used currently for application of AI and healthcare. I think they themselves are in evolution, and the future concepts are going to be very different. One of the things that is commonly missed is that AI itself is not static. The models over there are constantly evolving. The models that we used 3 to 4 years ago in my group, we are not using many of those models anymore because there are newer, better models that are available thanks to many of the technology companies, and we are using those now. So similarly, in the future, I don't think we are going to use the same concepts, although we have learned a lot from them, but the future is probably going to look a little bit different. But I think we need to form some of these, what I call utility companies, which will help adopt and implement AI in healthcare. And again, a sneak preview for this, something that was an impetus from COVID-19 pandemic is looking at quantum computing. Hopefully in the future, as we gain better data sets, as we need more compute power, there are solutions that are coming together to help us with that. And again, this pandemic has facilitated the need, has showcased that this is needed, and this is something that will truly help us in the future. So for that, what do we need to do? We need to stay hungry and we need to stay foolish. We need to keep developing these models. We need to lead. We need to participate in defining this for ourselves. And we need to be cautious in our approach too. So I'm going to conclude by stating that these have been very successful years, despite the challenges of COVID-19 pandemic, where AI and healthcare continues to evolve. The research work continues to evolve. The external validations are happening more and more. The implementation of these AI models are happening at a greater speed, and we are learning more in a better way. There's more research that needs to go into the translational aspects of AI in healthcare. There is increasing effort around systemness, so that we are working in a collaborative manner. I think we are defining some of the challenges better, and by defining those challenges better, we are designing the solutions in a better way. And of course, we are seeing a lot of enthusiasm at all levels. And that's why, thanks to HIMSS Minnesota, we are here in December, right around the holidays, talking about this. So the big question that I'll leave for you, especially as you think about what are you going to do in the new year, is what are you going to learn new about AI in healthcare? Think about that. Think about the promises you want to make for the new year. But I'll leave you with this one last question. Can AI save lives? Just like any other drug or device, we always evaluate it with the benefit context. Does it benefit our patient? Does it improve care? Does it reduce mortality? And I think we need to think about it the same way, that these AI algorithms, are they going to help save lives, decrease mortality, decrease morbidity? And that's the best way to evaluate them for patient care. I'm going to stop at that, but we'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Piyush. That's amazing, and that's very inspirational. I ask audience to ask questions that could be used chat window or Q&A button. Please use either way and type your question there. Until there, I actually ask you very tricky question. IBM Watson exists for almost 10 years, a lot money, a lot talents, a lot resources, but still not to the moon. How you can comment on that?
Yeah, again, let me take it at a larger context. I'm not going to speak specifically about one particular company, because we have seen similar issues with many other companies too, right? So Amazon went into this, Google has had the healthcare group. So we can look at it from a larger context. And that's why if you think about the slide that I showed, I think those were all lunar missions. I think we learned a lot from them, and we learned a lot from their failures too. And that's why we are here, where we are right now. And if we think about the initial electric cars or these hybrid cars, we had the Toyota Prius, and we had some of these other cars that really didn't work out. But today we have Teslas and Mercedes and so many other electric cars that are coming about. Similarly, I think those were our early efforts. And I don't necessarily think of them as failures. I think those were all teaching moments for us. Those were all learning moments for us. We have learned a lot from that. And that's why my analogy is that I think the future of AI in healthcare is going to be very different. I think we have to go on mission Mars. And that is going to take a completely different view. That is going to require a completely different strategy from our prior missions. You can't take the same module or the same engine that took us to moon and take it to Mars. You can't. So the same way, the different modules or the different designs that we have used and we have learned from with the lunar missions, I think we have learned a lot, and I think we are going to design the future with that. And that's why I say failure is not an option. It's up to us to make sure that we are successful in this. It's a science, and we have to see how we utilize the science in the best possible manner to help us and to help our patients.
Yeah, no, that's a very valid point, and definitely quantity become quality at some point. And it's still, still interesting to what we can learn from, from this big company with enormous amount of the resources and so on. That's good. Okay, looks like there are no questions from audience, and probably we return back couple minutes, 5 minutes back to the time. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for this presentation. And that will be archived on the Minnesota HIMSS website and uploaded to YouTube for a future reference. Thank you and bye.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me. Happy holidays.